All right, so let's dive into something pretty cool today that could completely change how we think about software development.
Yeah, sounds good.
We're talking about CodeFuse ChatBot. It's this open source AI assistant, and it's designed to make the whole software lifecycle easier.
Yeah. It's really interesting because what makes it so fascinating is that it's not just spitting out code. It's not just generating lines of code.
Right.
It's actually built to understand and work with how complex real-world software projects are.
When you say complexity, what do you actually mean by that?
Well, imagine,
Like, what does that look like in the real world?
yeah, well, say you're trying to figure out this giant code base, right? Thousands of files, everything's connected, and you need to just understand how it all works together.
Right.
It would take you forever, weeks, maybe even months to really get it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've been there. It's like navigating a maze, but blindfolded.
Exactly. And that's where CodeFuse Chatbot is really useful. It can analyze these entire code repositories, not just for like little syntax errors, but to actually understand the architecture, how all the different pieces are working together.
So it's like having like an AI architect that can map out the whole software landscape.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
That's really cool.
And it can help with designing new features, generating code snippets, and even finding potential issues before they become big problems.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that sounds incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
But how does it actually do that? How does it actually achieve that level of understanding?
Well, one of the key innovations is that it uses what's called a multi-agent framework.
Okay.
Think of it as a bunch of specialized AI agents, so different AI specialists working together on these really hard tasks.
So it's like a team of experts, basically.
Yeah.
Each with their own skill set.
Exactly.
The source material mentions data processors, web crawlers, sandboxes.
Yeah.
What are these agents all about?
Right. So the data processor is kind of like the information gatherer. So it looks at all the code, the documentation, any other data, and it uses that to build a real understanding of the project.
So it's like the research assistant gathering all the information.
Exactly. And then we have the web crawler.
Okay.
And this one is constantly searching the internet for even more information.
Wow.
Like relevant libraries, frameworks, even discussions online.
So it's like an AI research team that's always learning.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
And there's the sandbox, and that's super important because it's a safe space to test the code.
Oh,
So you're not messing up the main project.
right.
Which is really important when you have tons of developers working at the same time.
Especially on like a large project.
Exactly. You don't want some experimental code to crash the whole system.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So the sandbox lets developers experiment and make sure their code is perfect before adding it to the main project.
Got it. Now, you mentioned something called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. What is that all about, and what role does that play in all of this?
So a RAG is kind of a cool technique. It combines the power of those big language models, the LLMs, with external knowledge sources.
Okay.
So think about it this way. ChatGPT is great at making text,
Right.
but it only knows what it's been trained on.
Right. So it might be able to generate code that's grammatically correct, but it might not understand the specifics of the project.
You got it. And that's where a RAG comes in. It lets CodeFuse Chatbot connect to all this extra information, like other code repositories, documentation, even internal knowledge bases. So its code suggestions are much better and more specific to the project.
So it's tailoring its suggestions.
Exactly. And this is where the web crawler agent comes back in, because it finds that relevant information to help the LLM do its job.
That's amazing. So you're combining the power of LLMs with like all the information online.
It's a pretty cool approach.
That's really interesting. But let's talk about knowledge graphs. How do they fit into all of this?
Knowledge graphs are just a way to organize information,
Okay.
like a map of concepts and how they're related. Like a family tree, but for information.
So for software, it's like mapping all the classes, functions, and modules.
Exactly. And you can connect those to documentation, design specs, or even external resources.
So it's not just reading code, it's understanding how everything is related.
You got it. And that lets it do things like automatically generating documentation from comments, finding potential bugs by checking the code against the design, or even suggesting different ways to do something based on best practices.
Wow, that sounds like it could save so much time and effort.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about the theory, but how do you actually use it? How can CodeFuse Chatbot be implemented?
The good news is that it's open source. Anyone can use it.
Oh, great.
You basically need Python and Docker. Pretty standard tools.
So any developer could get this up and running.
Yep, and there's documentation to help you.
Okay, so that's not too bad then.
There might be some extra steps for people using Apple Silicon, but overall, it's pretty straightforward.
That's really good to hear. Now, I'm sure our listeners are curious about how this could actually be used. Can we look at some real-world examples?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're going to talk about next. We'll look at how it can be used for onboarding new developers, automating code reviews, and even handling that scary legacy code migration.
Oh, wow, that's great. So it sounds like we're just getting started with what's possible here.
For sure.
But before we move on to that, can we dig a little deeper into the Fast Chat integration? You said it integrates Fast Chat for private large language models. What does that even mean, and why is that important?
Sure. So private LLMs are basically LLMs that are trained and kept within a specific organization,
Okay,
not like ChatGPT, which is public.
got it. So what are the advantages then of using a private LLM?
Well, the main one is control. Organizations have more control over the data used to train the LLM. This is super important for companies with sensitive information.
Right. You don't want your AI accidentally sharing confidential data.
Exactly. And you can also customize it more for your specific needs.
Oh, interesting.
You can train it on your own documentation, code, even your communication style so it understands you better.
So it's like having an AI that speaks your company's language.
Exactly. And that's why the FastChat integration is so cool. FastChat is this open source platform for building and deploying these private LLMs. So CodeFuse ChatBot lets you use the power of these LLMs without having to build everything from scratch.
That's awesome, especially for smaller companies that don't have the resources to do that themselves.
For sure. And it's just one example of how CodeFuse ChatBot is constantly getting better, adding new technologies to make AI-assisted development more powerful and easier to use.
This is all really exciting, but I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear about how it can be used in the real world. So let's take a closer look at those use cases after a quick break.
Sounds good. We'll be right back with more on CodeFuse ChatBot and how it's changing software development.
Great.
Okay, so let's dive into some real-world applications for CodeFuse ChatBot
Okay, sounds good.
and how it can actually be helpful for different organizations.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how this works in practice.
All right, so let's start with a common challenge. Onboarding new developers.
Right.
So imagine a new person joins a team
Yeah,
and they have to deal with this huge code base.
it's overwhelming.
Right. Trying to get up to speed can be really tough.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's where CodeFuse Chatbot comes in.
Okay.
It's like having a virtual mentor guiding them through everything.
Oh, wow.
So instead of spending weeks just trying to figure out the code,
Right.
CodeFuse Chatbot can just analyze the whole project and create documentation that's specifically for that new developer and their role.
So it's like having a senior developer available 24/7 to answer all their questions.
Exactly. This can really speed up the onboarding process.
And that's a big win for everyone,
Yeah,
especially these days when finding and keeping good developers is so important.
absolutely.
So what about other uses?
Well, let's talk about code review.
Okay.
Super important for making sure your code is good quality,
Right.
but it can take so long.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
I've spent hours and hours just staring at code trying to find bugs.
Yeah, and that's where CodeFuse Chatbot can help. It can do a lot of that work for you.
Oh, really?
It analyzes the code for potential problems, flags things that need more attention,
Okay.
and even suggests improvements.
Wow. So it's like having another set of eyes.
Exactly. And it's super thorough. This lets the human reviewers focus on the bigger picture,
That's amazing.
like design decisions and the overall architecture.
That makes the whole code review process so much better.
Much more efficient, yeah.
That's really valuable. But I'm thinking this could also be helpful for other parts of an organization, too.
You're absolutely right. For example, think about a company with tons of documents,
Yes.
policies, procedures, technical specs, all that stuff.
Oh, it can be a nightmare trying to find what you need.
Exactly. And it happens all the time. But with CodeFuse Chatbot,
Okay.
you can create this central knowledge base
Right.
that's super easy to search. Anyone can just ask a question,
Wow.
and CodeFuse Chatbot will find the right information instantly.
That's incredible. That would save so much time and frustration.
Absolutely. And it gets even better because it can actually understand the connections between the code and the documentation.
Oh.
For example, it could look at a piece of code
Hmm.
and then pull up all the design documents or internal policies that are related to it.
So it's not just about what the code does, but why it does it.
Precisely. This lets it do things like automatically create documentation from the comments,
Right.
find potential compliance issues, or even suggest different solutions based on company rules.
That's so powerful. So we've talked about onboarding, code review, and knowledge management.
Right.
What other uses are there? What else can it do?
Well, one area with huge potential is dealing with legacy code.
Oh, the legacy code.
A lot of companies have these old systems
Yeah,
that are expensive to maintain and really hard to update.
it's like a ticking time bomb. Everyone knows it needs to be fixed, but no one wants to touch it.
Exactly. But CodeFuse chatbot could help.
Really? How?
It can analyze that old code, find potential problems,
Okay.
and even suggest how to move it to a newer system.
That could save companies a ton of money and headaches.
Absolutely.
It's like having an AI consultant helping you with the whole process.
Yeah, a pretty smart one too.
This is all very impressive.
Yeah.
But I have to ask,
Yeah.
what about the future? Is CodeFuse chatbot just a cool,
Right?
or is this the beginning of something much bigger in software development?
I think it's definitely a sign of things to come. It's a big step toward using AI to make software development smarter and more automated.
So we're just scratching the surface of what AI can do.
Exactly. And one of the things to pay attention to is the focus on making these systems more explainable and transparent.
What do you mean by that?
As AI gets more complex, we need to understand how it makes decisions
Right.
and make sure those decisions are aligned with our values.
That makes sense. You
Yeah,
don't want these systems to just be powerful.
right.
They need to be trustworthy too.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
that's one of the good things about CodeFuse chatbot being open source.
Oh, okay. How?
Everyone can look at the code
Uh-huh.
and contribute to making it safer and better. And that sandbox environment we talked about, that's really important too,
Right.
because it isolates the code so it's not as risky.
So transparency and a controlled environment are really important for making sure AI development is done responsibly.
Exactly. And there's another trend to keep an eye on:
Okay, what's that?
the rise of low-code and no-code platforms.
Oh, interesting.
These platforms use AI to help people who aren't programmers create software.
Wow. So anyone could build software.
That's the idea. It could really democratize software development.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it could unlock so much creativity and innovation from people who never had the resources or skills to code before.
That's a really cool thought. But all of this brings up a big question.
Yeah.
What happens to human developers
Right.
as AI takes on more of the work?
That's the big question, and that's what we'll be discussing in the last part of our deep dive. We'll explore how the role of the software developer might change and what skills they'll need in this new AI-powered world.
That's definitely something I'm curious about. It sounds like we're on the verge of a major shift in the software world.
We are.
I'm looking forward to that discussion.
It should be interesting.
All right, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into CodeFuse chatbot and what it means for the future of software development. Last time we left off with a big question. What happens to human developers in a world where AI is doing more and more of the coding work?
Yeah, that's a big one. A lot of people are worried about that, and I get it. But I
Yeah.
think we need to stop thinking about it like humans versus machines.
Okay.
It's more about humans and AI working together, collaborating.
So instead of being replaced, it's more about figuring out how to work alongside AI.
Exactly. AI is great at all those repetitive, rule-based tasks, the stuff that can be automated, and that frees up humans to do what we're good at, the creative stuff, the problem solving.
So you're saying AI can handle the boring parts of coding so humans can focus on the big picture.
Exactly. Think about it. AI can generate boilerplate code, do basic debugging, that kind of stuff. But humans can focus on designing innovative solutions, figuring out complex architecture, making sure the software actually works for people.
So it's less about writing lines of code and more about actually solving problems.
Exactly. And that could make being a developer even more fulfilling. Less time on the tedious stuff, more time to be creative, to experiment, to really work together.
So it's not about getting rid of human developers, it's about making their jobs better.
Right. And I think it could lead to better software overall, more innovative, more user-friendly software that actually makes a difference.
That sounds great. But what about the people who are worried about losing their jobs? If AI can do so much, will there even be jobs for human developers in the future?
Well, every time there's a big technological change, the job market changes too.
Right.
But history shows that we usually end up with more jobs, not fewer, just different kinds of jobs.
So it's not about job losses, it's about job shifts.
Exactly. As AI takes over those routine tasks, we'll need people who are experts in things like AI integration, algorithm design, data science, user experience.
So these are areas where humans are still going to be essential.
Absolutely. Things like creativity, empathy, critical thinking. Those are going to be more important than ever.
So developers need to adapt and learn new skills.
Yeah, it's all about lifelong learning. We need to be prepared for a future where working with AI is just part of the job. It's not enough to just know how to code.
Right.
We need to know how to work with AI, how to understand what it's doing, how to use it ethically.
It sounds like we're talking about a pretty different future for software development.
Definitely. And that shift is already happening. We're seeing AI and machine learning being taught in schools and boot camps.
So we're preparing the next generation of developers for this new world.
Exactly. And I think it's exciting. This collaboration between humans and AI could help us solve some of the world's biggest problems.
Oh, wow. Like how?
Think about it. AI could help us develop software that addresses climate change, helps prevent diseases, even fights poverty.
That's incredible. It makes you realize that AI could actually be a force for good.
I think it can, but we have to remember that AI is a tool.
Okay.
It's up to us to use it responsibly and ethically, to use it to create a better future for everyone.
That's a really powerful message.
Mm,
It's a reminder that technology is powerful, but it's our human values that really matter.
I agree. We need to be thoughtful and intentional about how we use these tools.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into CodeFuse Chatbot and the future of software development. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's sure to spark your curiosity and make you think differently about the world. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those big questions.